Is the concept of porn addiction dangerous? What's up everybody, my name is Gabe Deem and this is the Reboot Nation. This channel is dedicated to helping people struggling with porn problems and raising awareness about porn problems.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
Because porn screwed me up to the point where I couldn't get a boner without it, and I'd like other people not to end up in the same situation, feeling broken and alone. Unfortunately, some articles come out from time to time that try to deny porn can cause any problems like addiction or sexual dysfunction. And today I want to look at one article that came out recently that tried to argue that the concept of porn addiction should be canceled because it's dangerous. The article listed 10 points that were so ridiculous, you'd think it was written for a porn site or something. But I want to stick to the content of the arguments put forth rather than resort to easy ad hominem attacks. So, let's get to it. The article I'm responding to that didn't cite a single thing for anything that it claimed is titled, "Why We Need to Stop Calling It Porn Addiction" by Madita. Madita starts off saying this: "I'm not denying the existence of problematic porn consumption behavior, although I doubt it is nearly as common as the media makes us believe. The expression porn addiction, however, which is becoming a buzzword in public discourse, is not just a phrase or a joke, it is a whole narrative." So starting off, her beef with the concept of porn addiction appears to be about formal semantics. Porn addiction is continued use despite negative consequences. Or, as Madita would say, problematic porn consumption behavior. Problematic because they continue to use despite negative consequences. Addiction to both substances and behaviors like gambling or porn can be observed through measurable physiological changes in the brain's reward circuit. Which brings me to her first point. Porn addiction is pseudo-scientific. She says, contrary to frequent claims, the science is not there. False. There are now over 40 neuroscience-based studies that all support the addiction model and over 20 reviews of the scientific literature that support the porn addiction model from some of the top behavioral addiction experts in the world. In a 2019 paper, neuroscientist Matthias Brand, who's published more studies on the topic of porn addiction than anyone in the world, said this: "Empirical evidence suggests that the psychological and neurobiological mechanisms involved in addictive disorders are also valid for pornography-use disorder." Madita starts her paragraph with this: "Porn addiction is not a medically recognized diagnosis," talking about how it's not in the DSM. Then, hilariously, at the end of the same exact paragraph, she says this: "Even scientific research does not happen outside of ideology. May I remind you that homosexuality was officially considered a mental disorder until 1987? She literally just refuted her own point by claiming it doesn't matter what's in the DSM because as science comes out, it changes. A point I actually agree with. The reality is that no mental health problem used to be in the DSM because the DSM used to not even exist. To say it another way, addictions have always existed before the DSM existed, and if it goes away, addictions will still exist. The science that supports the porn addiction model is the same kind of science that has gambling and gaming now in the behavioral addiction category of the DSM. I wonder if Madita thinks gambling addiction's real. Anywho, those over 40 neuroscience-based studies that support porn addiction is what led the world's most widely used diagnostic manual, the ICD-11 that belongs to the World Health Organization, to introduce a new diagnosis suitable for what lay peeps would call porn addiction, compulsive sexual behavior disorder. Here's an important point. Neither the ICD-11 nor the DSM-5 ever use the word addiction to describe an addiction. They use the word disorder. So for alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, heroin addiction, cigarette addiction, they use words like gambling disorder or nicotine use disorder, etc. Put simply, the science that supports compulsive sexual behavior disorder, what many experts believe aligns with porn addiction, is there. It'd be great if she would acknowledge it. Point 2, it diverts attention away from mental health issues. Addiction, regardless of what one is addicted to, is a mental health issue. She offers a straw man here. When someone cuts themselves, we would never consider them addicted to razor blades. Right, because that would be dumb. An alcoholic isn't addicted to glass bottles either. A cigarette addict isn't addicted to cartons. A gambling addict isn't addicted to cards, and a porn addict isn't addicted to a keyboard and a mouse. Addiction is the pathological pursuit of reward, regardless of what device you use to get the reward, that manifests after addiction-related brain changes take place. She goes on, framing something as addiction implies that the addict would be fine if only this toxic substance was not part of their life. Now right here she shows a fundamental misunderstanding about addiction. Addiction doesn't have anything to do with whether or not a substance has a toxic effect on the brain or body. Addiction is about whether or not the brain's reward circuit changes in response to engaging in a rewarding behavior or substance. Gambling, for example, is a real addiction, but simply pulling a lever or rolling dice doesn't cause a toxic effect in the body. And concluding point 2, she gets at her real argument. This means to overlook the deeper roots, such as anxieties or depression, that an unhealthy porn consumption may be a symptom of. She's claiming here that porn addiction always arises from some underlying pre-existing issue and is never the cause of issues. While pre-existing issues can increase the likelihood of developing an addiction, there's plenty of addicts that don't have pre-existing issues. This is why thousands of addiction experts at the American Society of Addiction Medicine define addiction as a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Primary meaning it's not the secondary symptom of some underlying pre-existing mental health condition. Addiction doesn't divert attention away from serious mental health issues. Addiction is a serious mental health issue. Point 3, it trivializes actual addictions. Calling someone's biweekly masturbation habit an addiction is deeply disrespectful of anyone struggling with a bona fide addiction. First of all, we're not talking about masturbation, we're talking about porn. And you shouldn't need porn to masturbate. Second of all, porn addiction is a bona fide addiction. The American Society of Addiction Medicine says this: addiction is about functioning in brain circuitry and how the structure and function of the brains of persons with addiction differ from the structure and function of the brains of persons who do not have an addiction. Food and sexual behaviors and gambling behaviors can be associated with the pathological pursuit of rewards described in this new definition of addiction. Point 4, it is misused as an apology for shitty male behavior. Addiction is never an excuse. Addiction can be an explanation, but explanations don't absolve anyone of guilt or wrongdoing. Crime, for example, often can have an explanation behind it, but it's still a crime. Addiction and bad behavior aren't mutually exclusive. Now, what's hilarious about this point is she only mentions male behavior. By singling out men, she does the exact same thing her entire 5th point's about. Which brings me to her 5th point. It reinforces gender stereotypes. Addiction has no gender. There are plenty of women addicts, but don't take my word for it. Listen.
Addicted to pornography.
I was addicted, and I knew I was because it was, binge watching it. It was skipping school to watch it.
Like actual sex, I couldn't get wet. I just thought, okay, maybe I'm desensitized. As soon as that happened, I stopped watching porn. And then after about 3 to 6 months, my body returned back to usual.
A 12-year-old girl addicted to porn.
And I became heavily addicted to it by the time I was 17.
I struggled with pornography addiction.
Point number 6. Porn addiction is essentially anti-masturbation. No, it isn't. Reboot Nation, NoFap, Reddit's Porn Free, YourBrainOnPorn.com, Your Brain Rebalanced are all not anti-masturbation. And my homies over at Fight the New Drug don't have a stance on masturbation at all. We are all concerned with the potential negative effects of porn. We're not concerned with masturbation. In fact, a test I encourage those who feel like they're dependent on porn for their arousal is to see if they can masturbate without porn and get an erection. And just to be clear, believing in porn addiction doesn't mean you're anti-porn either. Acknowledging something can potentially be an addiction doesn't mean you're anti that something. Believing that alcoholism is a real addiction doesn't make you anti-alcohol. Believing in gambling addiction doesn't make you anti-poker. And believing in porn addiction doesn't make you anti-porn. Point 7. Porn addiction is a form of disease mongering. No, it isn't. Here she tries to imply that those concerned with porn addiction and want to help people are some type of snake oil salesman. The thing is though, encouraging those who feel addicted or dependent on porn to try and abstain from porn for a period of time and see what happens is free. The reboot process is free. Our solution is free. We suggest those who feel like they have a problem try and give up porn to recover, and our advice works for a lot of people. She ends this point by saying this: an ever-growing self-help industry is financially profiting from their sexual shame. A pretty gross accusation towards those who want to professionally help people recover and get their lives back. I always laugh when those who deny porn causes problems say follow the money, as if the porn industry and they themselves don't have financial incentive and benefit and profit from propaganda articles like this one, and often the manipulation and coercion of desperate, young, gullible people. And I'd be remiss not to mention that Madita's Twitter bio says she's pursuing her PhD on porn addiction as moral panic. She literally is trying to make a career out of writing articles like this and denying the existence of porn addiction. Point number 8. Porn addiction fuels media panic. Here she attempts to assure us that there's nothing to worry about, that concern about porn's negative effects is just another cultural anxiety to a new medium. The idea of smartphones full of addictive smut fits all too perfectly into this intergenerational nightmare. The idea of smartphones full of porn? It's not just an idea, it's a reality. We know that young people are watching a ton of porn. A 2019 study said the rate of teenagers being exposed to pornography before the age of 13 has gone up 3-fold over the last decade and now hovers around 50%. Over half of kids by age 13. That should concern everyone and needs more media attention. Point number 9. Porn addiction has a missionary agenda. False. Recovery forums like Reboot Nation, NoFap, Porn Free, Your Brain Rebalanced are all completely secular. Most of them were founded by atheists, have no moral opinion about porn use, and don't want to see porn banned. The entire reboot movement started because young guys got screwed up by porn to the point their dicks didn't work anymore. They quit porn and eventually got their dicks to work again with a real life partner. Porn addiction, like all addiction, isn't about moral opinions, it's about brain changes. In fact, the ICD-11's compulsive sexual behavior disorder explicitly says this to refute this point. Distress that is entirely related to moral judgments and disapproval about sexual impulses, urges, or behaviors is not sufficient to meet this requirement. Point 10. It is instrumentalized by anti-porn groups. Of course, groups that are against something will use any information of whatever they're against showing potential negative effects to their advantage. That in no way takes away from the fact of whether or not something is or isn't potentially harmful. She goes on to say this: the porn addiction narrative is a useful way to frame pornography as an evil medium that we need to get rid of. Is Alcoholics Anonymous on a mission to ban alcohol? No. Alcoholics Anonymous exists to help people with alcoholism. In the same way, porn addiction recovery communities and forums exist to help people struggling with porn addiction or sexual dysfunction, and would like the world and academics to acknowledge the problem as legitimate and not dismiss it as a dangerous concept. I'll tell you what is dangerous: giving a child unlimited access to internet porn without any education on potential negative effects. The porn industry and their friends deny any science that shows their product potentially having negative effects on people, just like the tobacco industry did for decades. And denying science that shows potential harm, now that's dangerous. Alright y'all, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you want more scientific information about how porn can lead to addiction, sexual dysfunction, morphing sexual tastes, check out yourbrainonporn.com. If you want help during the recovery process or just want to journal your recovery process, check out our free online recovery community at rebootnation.org. And if you found any of the content on this channel or the websites beneficial, please consider supporting us. I'm now on Patreon. Patreon.com/GabeDeem. All right, much love. Bye.